welcome everybody to the webinar. Thank you so much for joining us. Tonight we're going to be covering whether or not you need a graduate diploma in law. So introductions first and foremost. My name's Sydney. I'm the Student Recruitment Officer at the College of Legal Practice. I oversee the student's journey from initial inquiry through to accepting a place onto the course. And I'm also joined tonight by Kathryn, who is the GDL module leader. We're very lucky to have her because she's going to be talking us through whether or not you actually need the GDL and also doing a bit of a deep dive into what our GDL programme entails. And then the picture's not on there, but we do have Camilla, and we're very lucky to have her too because she will be speaking about her student experience when studying the GDL. Currently waiting for her grades, but we're going to pick her brain anyway and try and give you that extra insight into what it's like studying with us. So I've given you a bit of a snapshot, brief overview of what we'll be covering, but here's a detailed look. I'm going to start off by giving you an introduction to the College of Legal Practice so that you have a bit of background knowledge on us as an education provider. And then I'll pass over to Kathryn to talk about the benefits of completing the GDL, whether or not it's necessary, and also our programme before she passes back to me. And I will be asking Camilla about her student experience before briefly touching on our upcoming start dates and the admissions criteria. And as you can see there, if we've not answered your questions as we go along, then there will be the opportunity for us to answer those at the end. So, who are the College of Legal Practice? So, for any of you that aren't aware, we are a fully online postgraduate law school. All of our courses are completely online. We specialise in SQE preparation, and our parent company is the College of Law in Australia, and they're actually the leading legal education providers over in Australia. So, overall, we do have around sort of 25 years of digital learning expertise. Now, when it comes to our ethos and what kind of sets us apart from other legal education providers is that we believe that courses should be accessible and affordable. So we pride ourselves on trying to make our courses affordable while still offering, personal and targeted individual support and creating an inclusive and supportive learning environment for our students. So that might be if anybody needs reasonable adjustments, we will try and get those in place. And also with us being online, it does help because our courses are more flexible, so it can fit around your other commitments, whether that's working, family, caring commitments, things like that. And the reason for all of this is because we're trying to facilitate increased access into the legal profession. So we're just trying to do our bit to try and reduce the barriers for our students that want to crack into the legal sector. And here is just a snapshot of some of the universities and some of the firms, companies that we work with as well, where we provide the SQE preparation elements of their courses or qualification. Now, for anyone that is still trying to decide whether or not becoming a solicitor is the best route for them, or whether or not you're still deciding about whether to be a solicitor or a barrister, then I definitely recommend accessing our Becoming a Solicitor guide. It just touches on the day-to-day life of a solicitor and the different sort of areas you can work within, and it'll just help you determine whether or not you think the solicitor profession is the right one for you. And we won't be covering it today, but that guide also covers how to become qualified as a solicitor via the SQE route. So it will give you that extra bit of information as well. And we've had lots of really positive feedback. So it's a really useful resource to access if you can. And that is it from me for the time being. I'm now going to pass over to Kathryn to talk through what the benefits are of completing a GDL. So over to you. You're on mute.
So I am. Thanks. And thanks to all of you for joining us on this August evening. I've got beautiful sunshine with me, so I'm hoping you've all got beautiful sunshine as well. Sydney just started off by telling us about the guide for solicitors, but people come and study the GDL for all kinds of reasons. And the biggest thing the GDL does is to provide you with that basic knowledge of the foundation areas of law in England and Wales. So you might be thinking about doing the GDL because you want to become a solicitor, but you might also have plans to be a barrister or just have an interest in law. So the GDL covers the foundation areas of law. So those foundation areas are English legal system, contract, crime and tort, land law, trusts law, and public and European Union law. So those foundation areas of law are the ones you need to progress on to be a barrister, and they are recommended as you go into preparing for the SQE if you want to be a solicitor. And they're recognised. You'll see them as the same in every particular course that you look at from that angle. So the GDL will help you from an employability perspective for any career or profession that requires you to have knowledge of those foundations of law. And as I say, it will prepare you for further study on the SQE, or if you want to train to be a barrister, or you might be thinking about becoming a legal executive, or just an area that requires some functioning legal knowledge. The GDL itself, you could, for those of you wanting to be a solicitor, the GDL is a good way of increasing your chances of passing the SQE first time, and that's exactly what you want to do. You don't want to increase those fees for the SQE. So to have the best chance of passing the SQE first time, the GDL will give you that depth knowledge of the law. And the good news is you also get 10% discount if you carry on and do an SQE prep course with the College of Legal Practice. So, is it necessary? Well, doing a law conversion course is necessary if you haven't already got a law degree if you want to become a barrister. So, if for those of you wanting to go off and study for the bar, a law conversion course is necessary if you don't already have an undergraduate law degree. So, it's still a requirement. If you want to be a solicitor, post 2021, I'm sure lots of you will already be aware of the changes that were made in legal education and the introduction of the SQE. You don't have to have it anymore, and you haven't had to have it since 2021. However, it is really, really difficult to go and sit that SQE if you haven't got a law degree or some prior preparatory knowledge of the law. So ideally, I teach across all the courses at the College of Legal Practice. So I help students with the SQE preparation for SQE 1 and 2. It is really difficult to go straight onto an SQE preparation course. And we have a number of students studying with us who go from the GDL to then go onto an SQE preparation course. So if you haven't got any prior knowledge of the law in England and Wales, or if you've done a law degree, but it's a very, very long time ago, or you've done a law degree from another jurisdiction, yes, you might have some background, but the very best thing for you to do if you want to go off and be a solicitor is get that extra time, refresh your knowledge or improve your knowledge. And our GDL is really tailored to take candidates from all kinds of different backgrounds. So whether you've got a little bit of prior knowledge of the law or none at all, we start everyone off in the same place. Next slide, please, Sydney. College's Graduate Diploma in Law. You see, I could sense that I was starting to move on to the next parts of the presentation. You may have already read about this on our website, but our Graduate Diploma in Law is 90 credits at level 6 in the higher education language. So if you think about that, a little bit like the third year of an undergraduate degree, and it will give you 90 academic credits. Now that's split up into 7 substantive modules. The first one is Introduction to Law, which is that basic English legal system. And then you have a further 6 modules to study. Now, I think we should have fixed this last time, Sydney, but we can make it into a good quiz. Can anyone tell me which module is missing off our slide today? And you're not allowed to answer, Camilla, because I know you've done the course. Anybody wants to hazard a guess which of the modules is missing? You can type it in the chat box. Oh, excellent, Nico. Excellent, Natalie. Well done. Yeah, we do teach criminal law as well, and my apologies. We will fix the slide for next time. And the way we do that on the course, so we start you off with Introduction to Law, which will give you those basic skills that you need to do your other subjects. We then move on and we do what's called short and fat. Okay, so we don't do long and thin. Short and fat lets you really concentrate on 3 modules at a time. So we start you off by doing criminal law, contract law, and tort law. You do your assessments, Then we move on and you get to really focus and hone in on land, public law and trusts. So you'll see courses that do all the modules at the same time. You'll see some that do, like we do, the short and fat. I think short and fat is better because it lets you really focus and hone in on the particular subjects you're studying at that time, achieve your skills, achieve your learning outcomes, and then move on and have another focused period. So that's the overall skeleton. Happy to talk in any length about any of that. What you will see if you're looking at different courses is you will see a similarity in the content that's covered because it has to be the foundation. So there isn't that much differentiation between GDLs in terms of content. Where it does differ is in terms of structure and support. So if anybody's got any questions around any of that, I'm happy to help. The most frequent question we get is around assessment. So I know some of you will have questions around assessment. Introduction to law is slightly different because we start you off gently because we're conscious that it might have been a long time since you've done any study, or it might be the first time you've looked at the law. So introduction to law, we immerse you in that module. So it's the only thing you do for a period of time, and the length of time differs according to whether you're signing up for our full-time route or the part-time route. But you have this immersive period in the module, and then it's immediately followed by your assessment. Now, the assessment for Introduction to Law, you get a research and analysis task and you get a multiple choice questionnaire test. Now, the multiple choice question test, for those of you that are interested in becoming a solicitor, really starts to mirror what you will face on the solicitor's qualifying examination. So we give you the opportunity to really start to get your head round MCQs, multiple choice questions, and the technique you need to answer those. So the assessment, you get 16 multiple choice questions you have to answer in a 90-minute period. You get a window in which to do that test. So there's a window of time in which you can choose to do it. You do it online at home, but once you click on that begin button, this is what I'm always saying to the students, once you click on that begin button, you have to do it. You can't click the button and then go back to it later. So that's the way it operates. And you get the research task as well, where you've got 13 short answer questions. Now, once you've successfully completed Introduction to Law, you move on to your first 3 modules. The assessment, we call these the core modules. The assessment for these modules is all exactly the same, but I'm going to talk about 3 because obviously you're doing 3 first of all. Now, the first 3, you are answering, and it's more like we've got essay style question on the slide, but really the first kind of assessment you do is a problem based assessment. We call it a scenario. So you get a question, but it's an extended question, which is set in the form of a real life, real world legal problem you might face. And we ask you to complete an answer. So it's a written extended piece of work. It's 1,800 words, but we give you a template to assist with that. So you're completing a template according to particular titles. So one of the things we ask you, for example, is to pick out the parties involved in a scenario. So if you're doing a criminal law scenario, you would be expected to identify who is the defendant in this particular scenario. So that's how it works. It's an essay style question. And also in the core modules, you get to do a multiple choice question test. Now, this one is 15 questions that you would be required to answer in 45 minutes. Now, actually, I'll move on to modes of delivery with the next slide. If you move the slides on for me, please, Sydney. I'll just pick up Rupinder's question while I'm talking. Thanks for your question, Rupinder. In terms of the assessment, they are open book. Okay, so they're open book assessments. You're doing them in your own house. The time you get to complete assessments depends on whether you're on the part-time or full-time course. So if you're on the full-time course, for your scenario analysis, you get a 3-week period to complete the scenario analysis. So the 1800-word piece of work, you get 3 weeks to complete that in 3 modules. So that gives you roughly, you can chop that time up any way you want to, but it gives you roughly a week for each module. With the multiple choice question tests, they're a little bit like Introduction to Law. You get a time window to complete the assessment. That time window again differs according to whether you're on the part-time or the full-time course. But once you click that begin button, you have to complete it in 45 minutes. You can't go back to it later. You can't have a look at the questions and then go back to it a week later. You have to sit at your computer and complete it. So you've got an element of choice as to when you do it, but then you'll have to go back and complete. You'll have to complete it at that one sitting. Now, I was starting, it's quite hard for me sometimes to talk about the modules and the assessments. I know that's always at the forefront of people's minds, but I don't like talking about the assessments without talking about how we support you. Because I think it's really natural, isn't it, to want to know about the assessment today, and please do ask any questions you've got at all. But just hearing about the assessment sometimes can be a bit, it can raise anticipation levels, can't it? If you haven't heard about the support we give you. So what we don't do is we don't just enroll you and then you get thrown into the assessments. We've got a whole process and a whole structure designed to support you to get to those assessments. We want to help you in the best way we can to give you the best chance of completing the GDL and completing those assessments. So I'll start off with the workshops. You get more workshops for the Introduction to Law module. So you get 8 workshops on Introduction to Law in that intensive first period to get that skill base so everyone's on the same page for Introduction to Law. Thereafter, for each of the main modules, you get a 2-hour workshop. Now, the way those workshops are structured mean that in every single workshop, so 4 workshops for each module, that's 12 in total, for each block, which is 24 for the 6 subjects. For each of those workshops, you get activity to complete prior to the workshop. So they're not lectures. Because this is independent directed study, what we do is we give you a list of guided readings and a list of activities to complete in advance of the workshop. And the workshops are premised on the idea that you come to the workshops ready to discuss your work with the supervisor, okay? And you'll be supervised by a subject matter expert. Now, the preparatory activities for those workshops mirror what you're asked to do in the final assessment. So if we take that scenario analysis that you're asked to complete for the final assessment, in every single workshop, we give you a scenario analysis. So it's not the same one that you'll sit for your assessments, but they are similar in nature and form. So the preparation we're asking you to do in every workshop is directly preparing you for that endpoint assessment. So by the time you get to the endpoint assessments on every module, you will have had multiple opportunities to practice the assessment that is being required of you at the end. And you'll get opportunities to come along, discuss that with a subject matter expert. And if you've got any questions that arise during the course, you can come in that interactive session and ask your question and have those resolved as you're studying. So that's the principal method of learning delivery. Now, on top of that, we have 6 big group meetings over the course of the year. We're currently calling them town hall meetings, but we're going to change that for your delivery in September. I think it's almost a bit of a hangover from COVID, isn't it? When we all used to know what a town hall meeting was, and we used to have town hall meetings all the time. And we realised that actually we might not be using that language of town hall anymore. So we're changing the name to course information sessions. Okay, so you'll have 6 course information sessions. Now, what that means is Your entire group, so everybody that's registered with you, whether you're on the full-time or part-time delivery, will meet as a big group. And these meetings are used to give you general information about the course. So we have two 60-minute meetings. They occur at the start of the course. So the induction meetings where we outline the course structure, a little bit like today, but in more detail. I'll talk to you about the course structure, what's going to happen during the course. So there's general information sessions. They're not just lectures, though. You have the opportunity to ask questions with the group and engage in discussion. And then we have 4 meetings as we go through the course, and we hold those meetings at particular points when you might need extra information. So as we're coming up to an assessment point, I will hold a town hall, a course information session with you, and I'll talk about the assessment and submission deadlines, etc., and some of the rules around assessment. When we've had a results release, we might have a meeting then and talk about the results in a general sense. So they're the town hall meetings, or as will be course information sessions. Another key part of the course is personal supervision. So when you enrol on the GDL, you will be allocated a personal supervisor. Again, this is a subject matter expert, but it could be a subject matter expert from any particular area, because the purpose of these supervision meetings is not subject content. It's to provide you with personal and pastoral support to help you through your journey through the programme. So right at the start of the course, you have one meeting with your supervisor and everybody else that's being supervised by that supervisor. So that tends to be about 10 people. So it's a smaller group session. You get an opportunity then to meet other people on the course and your personal supervisor and talk about your goals or objectives. So you might be coming to study with us just because you're interested, or you might be planning, you might have all the steps planned out for your future career as a solicitor. We talk about that in the first 30-minute meeting. Then over the course of the programme, you have another number of personal supervision meetings, which is just you and the supervisor, one-on-one. So you get to speak individually, and you can talk to that supervisor about any matters of concern. We schedule those meetings. The times change every year because we schedule them at key points on the programme. So again, if you're coming up to an assessment point, or if you've just received results, we will schedule a personal supervision meeting around that. Now, the number of meetings you get depends on whether you register for the 20-week or the 40-week programme. 40-week programme is a little bit more extended, so we give you 5 personal supervision meetings just to make sure there's no big gaps when you might feel that you've not had the chance to come and speak to one of the staff members. So you get 5 supervisor meetings on the 40-week programme and 4 one-to-one meetings on the 20-week programme. And I think that's the big overview on the GDL from me. I can always be tempted to talk for far too long about all things GDL. I hope I covered the key points for most of you today. As Sydney says, though, we have got plenty of time for questions at the end. Also happy to pick anything up in the chat if anybody thinks of anything as we're going. But most importantly, I think, is that you get the opportunity to hear fully from one of our current students. So I'm really delighted that Camilla has joined us today so she can tell you about the GDL in her own words, because it's always a bit more powerful, isn't it, hearing from students rather than hearing from the tutors. So thank you so much, Camilla. I'm going to hand back to you and Sydney.
Thank you, Kathryn.
Okay, can everyone hear me? And have I definitely stopped sharing my screen? Yeah, perfect. Okay, I'm on a new laptop, so everything's just in different places, and this is the first webinar I've done with the new tech, so I do apologise. But Camilla, thank you, welcome. We really appreciate you coming to share your experience, because it is really valuable for our potential students just to really have that extra insight to know what to expect when they're studying with us. Obviously, Kathryn's done a great job of explaining what the GDL includes, but you have lived experience. So can you just start off by giving us a quick introduction and giving a little bit of a background?
Yes, of course, and thank you very much, Sydney, and thank you very much, Kathryn, for this opportunity. And my name is Camilla, of course. I'm a GDL student, but also, and perhaps most important, I'm an ambassador student at the College of Legal Practice, and I'm very delighted to have this role and to play this role here. And as a student at the GDL, my purpose was to obtain a further qualification in the UK and to becoming either a barrister or solicitor in the UK. But to pursue this route, I need to obtain a law degree in England too. And so I decided to become a student at GDL because thanks to its intensive program and full-time program, I was allowed to achieve this title even in a short term, fundamentally, and thanks also to my law degree in Italian, my Italian law degree. It is important to me to achieve this goal even in a short term, in a short time. And so this is a short introduction of me. And so my connection with the UK depends also on the fact that I was a researcher at Plymouth University. So my connection with the UK law and UK is even more strong. So based on this, some months ago, I decided to pop in and to become part of the crew of this fantastic learning adventure.
Brilliant, thank you. That's such a good introduction because it's given us a really good idea of, like what motivated you. So were you working while you were studying with us then?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I was a full-time student, and at the same time, I was a full-time researcher, and I need to struggle between these different sides. Yes. So, and additionally, as also the ambassador, I have a further work.
Yeah, you threw yourself in. You really put yourself to work with that one. So that was juggling a lot. How did you find studying online? Have you done it before?
Yeah, so online is a very good opportunity if you want to achieve a degree or a qualification, a postgraduate or postgraduate qualification, and meanwhile you are employed in a full-time employment. And so I had some experience before to GDL, but are relating to part-time courses, for example, and these courses are relating only to, I don't remember exactly, 2-3 months at least, 2-3 months, not even more. And so after, thanks to GDL and thanks also to the opportunity to have always recorded lectures and also seminars or workshops and also town hall. Thanks to this, I will able to discharge my role as a researcher, full-time researcher, and at the same time to be a full-time student and to achieve this graduate diploma in law, this conversion course. And so studying online permits me to be flexible, at the same, to be even more competitive, and also to decide how to manage my time in between again, employment and personal life, studying life, learning life. And so this is...
It is good that you've highlighted the flexibility that's available with an online course, because as you say, all of the town hall meetings that will become course information sessions and the workshops, they are recorded, but time management is so important. So thank you for highlighting.
It's very important, time management, also when you are required to approach assessment. And you have a very good organization, very good management of your time, of your it is expected that you have a good plan to achieve and to respect the deadline fundamentally, because it is important to respect the deadline, to be in charge, to be totally engaged in this course if you want to achieve, also because a full-time graduate diploma is a very intensive course, and it is expected to be even more engaged and to follow every kind of workshops, to read and study in advance and after workshops, and also to have to be constantly in touch with your supervisor, first and foremost, with your lecturers, and also perhaps also with your peer. And in this respect, the WhatsApp group is plays a very important role for me, and also to be even more engaged in this full-time course.
Yeah, it is good that you made the most of being in touch with your supervisor and utilized that WhatsApp group, so that you still felt like you had a community, even though it's an online course. So would you say that you felt adequately supported by your supervisor while studying?
Yes, of course, because my supervisor was Charlotte Johnson,
Oh, yeah.
yeah, of course, and she supported me in a very excellent way, I can say, and also her suggestions, particularly one to read my assessment, to avoid any kind of infelicities or typos, is the most precious insight suggestion that I ever received. So I'm very grateful with Charles for this.
No, that's great to hear. That's really good to hear. So, obviously, Charlotte gave you some really useful feedback and tips. What would your advice be to anyone considering studying the GDL? Have you got any study tips for them?
So study tips at the GDL fundamentally to be even more part of this community, and also to manage your time, your plan, and to follow every kind of course, respect deadline, and be totally and fully engaged.
Yeah, definitely.
With the community, with also online community, if I may, if I can affirm this.
Yeah, I think that making the most and building that network is great, because obviously you can speak to them about the course, they can relate to you. And you mentioned about being organised as well, which is probably one of the main ones that we try and drill into our students as well. The flexibility in being online is great, but you do need to have that self-motivation and willpower, if you like, so that you can follow the course and definitely dedicate the necessary hours to study. So thank you so much for giving that little insight. I'm just trying to think, is there anything else? Does anyone else have any questions that they want to ask Camilla? What happens if you get really busy and can't take an assessment at the expected or recommended time? Is that one for you, Kathryn?
Yeah, I believe that Kathryn's better.
Yeah, might be.
Yeah, I'm happy to pick it up, but if you'll bear with me just for a second, Natalie, before I forget, I think it's creeping old age, but Camilla, thank you so much for that fantastic outline of the student's perspective, and a big congratulations from the GDL team. Camilla's just moving towards awards now, having completed the full-time program, and she, the amount of work that you've been managing alongside your other activities on the 20-week program is just fantastic, Camilla. We're really proud of you, and it's been such a privilege to have you bring that experience to the program. So I know, and your experience will pick up right on Natalie's question now about being really busy and the assessments. It is tough, isn't it? It's tough completing those assessments in that time period on the full-time program. In terms of your question, Natalie, we do. So what you will know at the start of the program, all the dates for your assessments are in the Canvas calendar. What I can tell you right now, and what I can tell you right now is if you do the full-time program, you get 3 weeks for the assessments. If you do the part-time program, it's 4 weeks for the assessments. Now, the minute you enroll on that course, the dates of those assessments will be in the Canvas calendar and available to you, and we can talk about them in the induction session as well. We can give you an overview of when those assessments are happening according to the course you're registered on. Now, if something happens, there's a couple of ways students get additional time for assessments. Now, one is we have students study with us that might be entitled under assessment regulations to what we call reasonable adjustments. So if you have a specific learning need, or you've received adjustments to assessment criteria in the past because of particular requirements or particular reasons why you might need extra time, we have the student services team work with students to ensure that that is put in place, and we can adjust where necessary if there are grounds for that adjustment. The other way that students receive extra time on their assessments is we have a policy. If something happens, if something unfortunate happens, say an emergency situation happens, say you were taken ill, we have an exceptional circumstances policy. So you might be entitled, if you were struck by a sudden illness, for example, you might be entitled to apply for extra time with evidence for the assessments. What we can't do, and Camilla has done fantastically well, but for most students, we do recommend, if you're in full-time work, or if you've got extensive outside commitments, or if you think that something might happen during the course of the programme where you will need extra time, we do tend to advise people to go on the part-time programme, because the part-time programme gives you more, we have more time, and if you miss parts of it, it's easier to catch up. Camilla may want to come back in after I've finished, but the 20-week programme is a great programme if you can throw yourself into it, and nothing is going to happen on the way. But because it is a very intensive programme, it is also quite easy to get behind very quickly. So if you miss 2 or 3 weeks, it is I can see Camilla nodding away. Would you say that as well, Camilla? It's really difficult to catch up, isn't it, if you miss 2 or 3 weeks?
So sometimes you may feel overwhelmed by the deadline and also by the duty to submit pre-assessment fundamentally by the deadline, and so it is important to manage also your motivation and your mental motivation, your mental well-being, to try to achieve and to respect fundamentally this deadline.
Thank you, Camilla. I think that's good to hear. Yeah, it's that fine balance, isn't it? We want to provide a rapid option for people, but because of that, it is an intensive programme. So my best advice is, if you think things might happen, and particularly if you think things might happen with outside work, because under the college's assessment regulations, outside work in and of itself is not sufficient grounds for extenuating circumstances, because that is something that can be predicted. So the difficulty that sometimes places for students is, if you're coming up to a very intensive assessment period and you get very busy in an outside job as well, it can be difficult to do anything about that. So if you suspect you might need a little bit more time, or you've got very demanding outside commitments, part-time programme is worth a look. If you think, and hopefully, you've got that 20-week period where you think actually things are pretty straightforward, you're not anticipating anything, do the 20-week programme, and if something unanticipated happened or an emergency happens, then yes, we'll deal with it at that time.
Yeah, just to add to that as well, we have had a few queries where sometimes inquirers will say, okay, well, can I start on the full-time course? And then if it's too much, can I change over to the part-time course? But our part-time course starts prior to the full-time course. And because of the cut-off, because the application deadline, I'll cover it in a bit more detail, but the application deadline for the GDL, we don't accept late applications because even the part-time course is quite intensive. So sometimes students are wanting to start with full-time and maybe have the part-time as a backup, but unfortunately that isn't something that we offer in line with our policies and procedures. So it is really important that you are giving quite a lot of thought as to which study intensity you're choosing, which I will touch on in a bit more detail. shortly. But I think that's it for now. Thank you.
No, sorry, Sydney. Thanks. I'll come back in there just for a second, because I'd probably reiterate that you can't do it the other way around either. Because
Oh,
I
yeah.
did have a query. No, I had a query from a student this year that wanted to move from the part-time to the full-time program, and we did our very best to look into it. But because the start dates are different for the two programs, it was just too difficult to achieve for them. We do only run one September delivery of each of these programs, and it's just not possible to transit between the two. So really do give it some thought. If you want to speak to Sydney or I in any further detail about the differences between those pathways, we can talk about that. So we've got a couple of questions in the chat, Sydney. So I was just thinking while I was reading, I don't know if you wanted to move on and then pick up the questions, or do the questions now. You sounded like you were moving on to say something else.
That's okay. I don't mind touching on some of them now if people have got them. So if you had more time than you expected, can you complete the part-time course earlier, even if you can't join the full-time? This is a good question because we do get asked this a lot. So you can't study ahead because the workshops are live. So you can study ahead to a certain point, but as Kathryn touched on previously, you will have activities and learning to do prior to the workshops, and then the workshops are live teaching. Once they've taken place, because they're recorded, they become on demand. So you can make up lost time, but you can't study ahead further than that. I think that's fair. I've maybe not explained that very well. But hopefully that makes sense.
I think you explained it really well, Sydney. I think what I'd say is we do staggered Canvas access. So when you enroll on the program, you will get access to Introduction to Law, and then really shortly afterwards your Block A, and then your Block B access will become later. And as soon as you get access to your module page, everything's on there. So you could study for all 4 workshops. You could do all the, if you got a free period, you could do all the study for all 4 workshops. But as Sydney's saying, the workshops themselves are live, and because they're live, they only get posted after the workshop has happened. So you could do all your prep in week 1 of the module, but you'd have to go back and revisit it if you wanted to participate in the workshops, and you'll only be able to access the workshop recording after the date of the workshop. The other thing that we don't do is that you have to submit you have to do those assessments in the assessment period. So the assessments get released to you at the end of the module, and then you get 3 weeks to complete them. So you don't get the assessments at the start of the module. So you have to do it in that 3-week period. So again, it's directed study. You could technically study for all the workshops in week 1 at the module, but then you would have to go and revise that information prior to the assessment to give yourself the best chance of assessment. There's also a question from Rupinder in the chat, Sydney, about offer acceptance program start.
Yeah, so what can you expect in terms of material delivery and getting set up on the online platform? So usually you will have access 1 week prior to the course starting when it comes to your online learning portal. We do recommend accessing your online learning portal as soon as you've got access, so that you can become familiar with the platform prior to the study officially starting. And I do believe we've got a few videos that walk you through how to navigate Canvas. It's Canvas, isn't it?
It is Canvas.
Yeah, okay, great. I get confused because our learning platform's Canvas, but in marketing we use Canva. So in my mind, the wires get crossed. One of them has an S, one doesn't.
That's just for everyone that's listening in. If some of you have studied recently, you'll be used to all these terms, but Canvas is our virtual learning environment. So it's the platform through which we deliver all your materials. And for those of you that have studied elsewhere or have recently completed study, it's just another version of Moodle or Blackboard or one of those kinds of systems you might have been using.
Yeah, that's probably a good question for Camilla. How did you find the online learning platform?
So Canvas is the first time that I approach Canvas, and it is quite different because fundamentally, and Blackboard is the most usual platform in a higher in education, or both in Italian in the UK fundamentally. So I was quite familiar with Blackboard, but it was interesting also Canvas because it's a platform where you have everything you need. For example, you have your calendar, your inbox, and also your initial page with the news update, and also you have the opportunity to connect Canvas, then the update on Canvas with your personal email address. Consequently, you are always update about what happened in this platform, and you can pop at earliest your convenience. So I believe that is a very good way, a very good platform, even if different from what I was familiar. But it is important also to become familiar and to experience different platform for learning, because it's also an opportunity to understand and to be updated with technology and different approach to education. So it was very good, the experience with Canvas.
That's good feedback. And great point. 9 times out of 10, for anyone that does study with us, 9 times out of 10, the information that you need will be on Canvas. Because you can access student services. If you've got any queries, you can access your supervisor, your timetable, as Camilla said. So 9 times out of 10, when it comes to, even if you decided to go on to apply for one of our SQE preparation courses, if you apply through the Student Hub, which is accessible via Canvas, you don't need to resubmit all of your qualification evidence because we'll have it on file and it will link straight away. So thank you for highlighting that, Camilla, because it just lit a light bulb in my brain and I thought I'll mention that. Rupinder, when it comes to the second part, when it comes to the delivery of hard copy materials, we usually send those out 2 weeks prior to the course starting, which is when, if you are self-funding, for anyone that's looked at the course fee schedule, usually it's broken into 3 payments. And prior to the course starting, most students have paid half of their total course fee, so half of £3,950. I can't do the mental math off the top of my head. And then once we receive half of your course fee, that's when we send out the hard copy manual that complements the online learning platform. Now, if you are an overseas student or an international student like Camilla, then we will invoice you for the postage fees, but we won't charge you extra for the manual. So the manual itself is included in your course fees. It's just when it comes to shipping overseas that we need to invoice you for that. So hopefully that has answered that question. If anyone else has any more as we go along, then please feel free to pop them in the chat. But what I will do now, thank you, Camilla, thank you, Kathryn. That was a really good discussion. I'm going to reshare my screen and we'll just whiz through these last few bits because we've only got 10 minutes left. And this is just kind of if you do decide that you want to study with us, even though we have given you that extra insight by having Camilla here, for anyone that wants to see the online learning platform, scan this QR code because we have a course demo and basically it just shows you how to navigate the platform itself. So it's really useful to manage your expectations of what you're getting if you do decide to study with us. Now, moving on, some people, what I will say, some people like Camilla, and as Kathryn highlighted, if you're prepared to throw yourself into study, they can work full-time, they can study full-time, and they can, successfully pass and achieve the graduate diploma in law. However, when it comes to the guidance that we give, we would always recommend that if you are working full-time or you do have a high level of family or caring responsibilities, to study on a part-time basis. So you can see the side by side here. And regardless of which study option you choose, the fee remains the same. Now, with the 40-week course, it's 20 to 25 hours of study each week. So it's slightly more manageable if you are working on a full-time basis and have a higher level of commitment in comparison to the full-time course, which runs for 20 weeks and you'd be studying for 30 to 35 hours each week. Now, this links in with the payment and the hard copy materials that we mentioned before. So usually half the course fee is paid prior to starting your studies, and the remaining half is paid halfway through your course. So if you study part-time, you will also have 10 weeks extra time to find the remaining course fee, if that is a concern for any of you, or if you're trying to get the money together. So 20 weeks into the part-time course, you would pay the remaining fee, and it's 10 weeks into the full-time course where you would pay the remaining fee. So that can factor in as well as to which study option is best for you. We are open to alternative payment plans. However, only once we've received half the course fee will we send out the hard copy materials, which I've already said, and the full course fee does need to be paid by halfway through. But if you're wanting to maybe ask if you can pay a certain amount on a monthly basis, you can request that after you have submitted an application by contacting Student Services, and we'll try our best to accommodate that. But typically it is split into 3. Okay, if you want any more sort of guidance on whether or not the part-time or full-time option is best for you, on our website, we do have a Choosing the Right Course for You webpage, and I definitely recommend taking a look at that if you can't quite decide. But as Kathryn said, if you do have any concerns, it's best to play on the safe side and do the part-time course. So, our next application deadlines and start dates. Our next part-time course is starting on the 8th of September, and if that is when you're looking to start, I strongly advise you get your application in sooner rather than later, because the deadline is the 25th of August. And as I said before, we don't accept late applications for our GDL programme. If you're looking to study full-time, you have got slightly more time because it starts on the 22nd of September and the deadline is the 8th of September. If you're wanting to wait a bit, we have got start dates coming up at the beginning of 2026. We know that the part-time course will run in February and the full-time course will run in March, but we are just still finalising the exact start dates. And to help give you an idea of when the application deadline might be, it's always 2 weeks prior to the course start date, but we do recommend applying it sooner rather than later. We are intending to have the up-to-date 2026 start dates on our course calendar within the next couple of months, and then applications will be open too. So just keep an eye out for that if it is something that you're interested in. And then I've just attached the admissions criteria because we do get quite a few queries as to what's accepted. So as a standard, we do request that you have a UK undergraduate degree with a minimum 2-2 classification or equivalent. However, if you have got a third as a classification, you are still invited to submit an application. We just request that you attach a personal statement making us aware of any circumstances that may have contributed to receiving a third classification. Now, if you don't have an undergraduate degree, we do accept 3 A-levels or the equivalent qualification, so same level, alongside at least 2 years work experience within a legal services role, for example, a paralegal. So it can be either or, it can be the undergraduate degree or the A-levels and work experience. It does not need to be both. And when it comes to English, if it isn't your first language, we do request an IELTS or equivalent qualification just to demonstrate that you have a good understanding of the English language. Examples of when this may be exempt is if you've studied a UK undergraduate degree in English, or you have another way of demonstrating you have a good understanding of the English language. So we get a few questions through asking whether or not certain qualifications would be accepted. And what we always have to advise is that your best bet is to submit an application with all of your evidence that you think would contribute to gaining entry onto the GDL, because everyone is assessed on a case-by-case basis. And in recruitment, we can give a rough idea as to whether or not we think you might gain access and meet those entry requirements, but we can't confirm anything until you have submitted an application and we have run all the evidence through the software and confirmed it. So that would be my advice. It's totally free to submit an application and apply to study with us. If we need any more information from you, we do request this via email. And And if not, if you don't meet the requirements, we will come back to you and explain why. And you can always, you know, provide more evidence if you have it at that point. An extra note on submitting an application, we will always send you a confirmation of receipt once you have submitted an application. If you haven't received that, please check your junk mail. If it's still not in your junk mail, there may have been an issue, and I recommend trying to submit it again. Rarely do people not submit, but just in case, that would be my advice there. Okay. So now we have the opportunity to answer any of your questions. We have a few minutes left. Just while you think what they may be, and before we get into answering those, I'm going to whack this slide up. So if you would prefer to have a one-to-one chat with either myself or my manager, then you can book in for a one-to-one chat via Calendly. The QR code is there. We are more than happy to answer any of your questions. What I will say is that the slots do get booked up quite quickly, so you might be better off giving us a call. If you don't get through to us the first time you call, please rest assured we will always give you a call back at the earliest opportunity. Or if you're wanting a bit more information on courses and resources, then your best bet is to send us an email, because we can always signpost you with relevant links, which is always really useful. And if you're not ready to start studying in September and you are wanting to be kept up to date with course information, signing up to the newsletter is a great opportunity for that, because we'll always send through any updates, useful resources, and things like that. And we'll also be sharing tips and tricks on our social media. So please give us a follow if you think that would be useful.